So when you talk, look at the lower camera. We set?
Yep. We're live.
All right. We want to give a nice, cheerful welcome to each one of you for joining us on this wonderful Saturday evening as we are having our first session in this series as we begin this first part of our series, The Basic Questions of Life. And we've been talking about so many wonderful things from Charles and Owen, Jessica and myself. Well, we're going to hear Owen here in about a week's time. You'll be hearing his presentation. But this is a special session that is us presenters and the team of folks here in our Southeast District and the Fourth Valley District have been talking about. We decided to say, hey, let's have a live session where you as the viewers who are watching us can have an opportunity to dialogue with us in a virtual platform. So we want to invite you to just share your thoughts. We're going to be doing a little bit of a recap and just kind of sharing some things that we have learned from each other's presentations over the past few weeks. But this evening is a special evening, like I said, as we've been talking, to try and give an opportunity for us to dialogue with each other, for us to dialogue with you. And as you can see, we're seated in a socially distanced platform, making sure that we are adhering to the rules. We do look forward, Owen and Charles, where our churches are going to soon open up, where we'll be able to reopen both this church and our church in Edinburgh, Granton as well. So this series, The Basic Questions of Life, we've been talking about some wonderful but very meaningful and important questions. Questions of, am I loved? Why is the world like this? Where do I find hope? And then this morning, you heard Jessica share on why Jesus. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. And Charles, I'm going to pass it over to you. He's going to kind of give us the format, a little bit of how we're going to engage with each other, and kind of how we as the presenters can kind of dialogue with you. So Charles, go for it, man.
Evening, everybody. Welcome. Glad you could join us. Yes, as Gabe says, we're all here, socially distanced here in our church in Dunfermline, which is kind of it's the most studio-like church we have. Here in this district. And yeah, we're here this evening to have a chat, have a discussion. It'll be the four of us discussing, but we've all got our devices here so we can follow along and make sure we're listening to what you guys are saying. There is a delay, so don't worry if we don't immediately jump onto your question. There's a good kind of 30-40 second delay or something like that between what we're saying and what you're hearing. So by the time we see your questions, it'll be quite a little while. Yeah. But yeah, we wanted to while we're waiting for questions. So there's the live chat on the video itself below us. You can send us messages on our Facebook page, our Instagram pages. That's right. We have a whole team who are sat in their homes working on those at the moment. And or if you know us, you can send us texts.
That's right.
Those do still work. So yeah, I can see Jordan and Jose saying hello. Hello to both of you this evening. Please do interact in the chat. We want to make sure everyone does that. Gabe said hello as well, but he's also here and he's already said hello, so we're not going to get him in. But yeah, it's good to have the four of us together. We've not been the four of us together since the beginning of this project. We've been talking about this now for 3 months, something like that. I think is kind of proper.
It's a bit longer, yep.
About that, and at no point have we actually all been in the same place. So
everything's been done through Zoom.
Everything's been through Zoom. All of the recordings have all been kind of partial, as it's been kind of 2 of us or 3 of us together at any one time. Just to try and limit contacts.
By the way, if you see any of us at any one point looking at our devices, we are actually texting and communicating, chatting. So if you see us looking down, not directly looking at a camera, it's because we're trying to respond and just engage with each one of you. So be certain that one of us will eventually get your questions and comments as well.
Yeah, we're all looking at everything.
That's right.
Throughout this next 40 minutes or so that we're going to be hanging out with you guys. So yeah, we're all here. Morella, good evening to you as well. And of course, Owen says hi. So, when somebody else starts talking, I'll type hi as well.
That's right.
So the four we've shown four presentations so far. Yep. And for me, they've all been really quite powerful, and even like even my own one, because it was there was a bit of gap between recording. Mine was the first one recorded, and then seeing it last week, and there was this big gap. I'm like, oh yeah, I'd forgotten I'd said that, and it was kind of it was still quite fresh when I saw it.
Yeah.
So with all of them, I found them a really interesting look. Who do we got? Neil, good evening. Nice to see you, Neil.
Hey, Neil.
Hi, Neil.
With you. So yeah, this because our hope here. A lot of people, when they talk about belief and religion, you can go from 0 to dogmatic in about 2 seconds. You can go from 0 to needing a degree in about 2 seconds, and that can be intimidating. But it can also be something that's it's kind of it's like intimidating and off-putting. But even for those of us who have, I think you have seen in our testimonies in the first us telling our own stories in that very first episode.
Yeah.
So myself and Gabriel, we grew up in the Adventist church, in the church that we
That's right.
in. Whereas Owen and Jessica, you guys both came in from outside, and I think I really like that balance between us and the different stories we had. I found those stories were really powerful, and I don't think the stories that you guys told, even though we've been friends for quite a while, I've never heard those stories.
All right, okay.
So those were new for me. I mean, how do you guys, the story of who you are, how does that really affect the whole, your whole walk, your whole journey in life?
Wow, that's a big question.
So that's what we're here for.
Yeah. So how does it affect my whole journey in life? I think I see the church very differently to many people who've grown up in the church, and because I'm from the outside, I still feel to a certain extent. I haven't grown up in the church, so I kind of feel I'm seeing it from a very different angle, and I'm seeing it from fresh eyes, and I can see things that sometimes other members just can't see because of they've always done it that way.
Yeah.
But I can go, well, why don't we just do it some way different? And I'm probably a lot more relaxed in doing things differently because I really recognize that, well, why can't we just do it differently? Why can't we do it that way? And so there's lots of different ways in which we talk about worship and how we speak to God and how we interact with God and the music that we choose to sing. We can do it differently. So I'm not so much constrained by the tradition of the church. I'm much more open.
That's a big one, Owen. Because, like you said, we were raised in the church, so in many ways, the burden of tradition was placed on us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
To carry on, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, this is how you do things. And if any of you guys who are watching who were raised in the church, you understand where we're coming from, where, when you pray, this is how you do it. When you sing, this is how you do it. This is the kind of music. But in a way, I'm going to use this word, you guys are kind of liberated from that experience. Your view on church was fresh. Your view on the Bible was fresh in your encounter with God. So that's very good, man.
Yeah.
I think that's a significant thought. Just what about you?
I think my experience coming to know God and coming to appreciate and believe in the Bible, it really defines who I am as a person now, because it's not something that was fed to me. It's not something that was taught to me. So it's not something I automatically believed. And I kind of like that I had to question. I'm not a person that takes things for face value anyway, so you can tell me something and I'll decide whether I believe you or not.
I'm married to her. That is so true.
But I like that you can take God and you can take His Word and you can research it and research it and research it, and then it's like, no, this is my own. This is my story. This is my belief. Not because it was pushed upon me, but because I know it's real.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do think, even though, for me, that's something I very strongly identify with. So when you see the way, because even with me and Gabriel, where we both did grow up in a strong church environment, both of us, it wasn't real until much later on.
That's right.
So even people who do grow up in church, it's very rare that you grow up in church and you're in church your whole life. Even people who are like that, it's quite common to have that period where you doubt, or you don't know, or you discover things for yourself. And I think I imagine that's true with pretty much every religion. You'll end up with a certain amount of kind of movement.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I really like about this series for me, that we're doing, is because it's something it is different, and so it's a different look at what I believe. And so I'm able to share things that I believe in a very different way to what I would have done 2 years ago, let alone 5 years ago, or 2 years ago, or 20 years ago when I was like 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of it's an evolving thing. It's a living, changing thing that we have. And so even though what I'm saying today, you ask me again in 5 years, I'll probably actually have a different answer.
Probably. And I think that's almost the sweetness about our relationship with God, is how we do mature and evolve in our relationship with each other, and our relationship with God. I mean, 5 years ago, we were different people, just in our marriage. 5 years ago, you were different with your wife and with your wife. So our relationships mature and they grow and they blossom into a new phase. So why can't it be that way with God and that way with the church? Yeah. Things can be different, you know? For those of you guys that are watching, if you watch our first presentation, we heard their testimonies with the topic of where do I find hope? And they talked about their individual journeys and their experiences of where they found hope. Like Charles was saying, we grew up in the church. I left the church for a period of time as a teenager and early university years, and went to some things I didn't, at the time, find too savory, but, trying to find happiness and trying to find something that would be more fulfilling for me. When I realized what I did find out there, it wasn't something that was satisfying. It wasn't something that was fulfilling. And I did pick up the Bible. Fortunately, I was still quite young when I found God, when I found the Bible. And it was something that radically transformed my life. If you're watching, they have shared their experience, and you can see their Bibles here with them. They shared their experience because of how this book specifically has kind of changed their life. So we're going to give you guys an opportunity here. Make sure you're using the chat boxes there below. If you've watched any of the first 4 presentations, Where Do I Find Hope? Am I Loved? And then Charles is Why is the World Like This? Jessica's Today, Why Jesus? If you have any questions on any of these presentations, feel free to use the chat box there below. I do want to ask a question here for Owen. Owen, you were talking about, in your experience growing up, a friend invited you to come to church. Something that you put off for a while. You kind of said, well, maybe not right now, maybe not. And then finally to shut him up, you said, all right, I'll go with you. Yeah. I think that was Jessica in some aspects as well, but you're talking about how you finally did show up and you felt accepted, you felt love. Is it possible, I'm going to ask you a hard question here, is it possible that people can experience that love experience, that community, that acceptance that you felt back then, however long ago you came to church? Can they find that in our church communities now? And how does that process work? How does that look?
Well, first, and answer to that question is definitely yes. I mean, we're actually seeing that in our Edinburgh Community Church, where we've had people come through the door and felt immediately accepted. And actually people who have been to many churches, and many Adventist churches, and found that they really felt accepted in the church. And, because we have people who understand that journey. They're not alone. And what we do is we are very practical about that transition that people are making. We help them and support them and make that transition. All of our experiences are unique. Yeah. All of our experiences are unique, and what we have to do is kind of recognize that people. So for some people, it can happen very quickly. For some people, it can take months and years for them to really fully experience Jesus in their life. For me, when I went to the church for the first time, I was 19 at the time, and the church was really full of a lot of young people, and they just embraced me. Actually, it was kind of funny because when for the first time people just kind of put their hands around me and was giving me hugs, and I was thinking, well, this is a bit
pre-COVID times.
Pre-COVID times. Yeah. So I kind of felt it was strange at first, but then I thought, wow, look at all this love that I'm seeing all around me. Look at all this acceptance all around me. And for the first time as well, in a church, I saw a lot of people have great aspirations and hopes, and people kind of aligned with me. I had hopes, aspirations, And so there's a lot of things that clicked with me immediately. And then really looking at the gospel itself, you probably hear this from my message that I preach or I share on Sabbath, is on Saturday, is that Christianity is very practical for me. It has to be practical. So the immediate thing that I started to do, I started to challenge all these things that I was being taught in the Bible. And so I would always go, okay, is this real? Can God really do this? And so I would challenge God. I know it sounds a bit arrogant and a bit, brazen, but I would challenge God, and I would say, God, if you're really there, show yourself.
Yeah.
And I think as many people, when they're starting that journey, I think people are kind of afraid to do that, and maybe people who've been in the church for a long time are afraid to challenge God. And I share very often that every year, Jessica shared earlier that she had to make a choice. Every year, I make a choice. I actually ask myself the question, do I still want to be a Christian this year? And making that choice is powerful for me.
Yeah.
Really powerful for me.
When you're highlighting something, this connection with the church is definitely that wrestling in those early phases of your walk with the church. You saw both the embracing, the loving community. You felt almost at home, but there was also you want to find out and verify, so to speak, what's kind of going here. Just the experience was just a slight bit different in many ways. There was a little bit of more questioning. There was a little bit more of going to different churches. And I remember, dating Jessica, and she was sharing with me how she would sit with pastors of different churches and almost drill them and saying, well, how can you prove that with the book that you believe, and so on and so forth.
Shine a light in their eyes.
Yeah, shine a light in their eyes, exactly. It's like good cop, bad cop kind of routine. Jessica, share a little bit about your experience. He came into the church. A friend invited him to come to church. He definitely wrestled with the Bible, wrestled with God. And I put here, is it okay to challenge God? So Jessica, what was your experience like? What can you tell us? And we'll kind of transition a little bit in just a second to why is the world like this? Go for it.
I just think it's okay to have questions. I think that sometimes we're afraid of having questions, or we even doubt our own questions. But also on the opposite side of that spectrum, we also can become close-minded by having too many questions, if that makes sense. So I think that there's something to say about having balance. So I think if we looked at not believing with the same skepticism as we sometimes look at believing in something, not having faith, like Charles brought up in his presentation, you said something to the effect that really struck a chord with me, and it was that not having faith takes just as much faith as having faith in something. I know you didn't word it quite like that, but to not believe in something actually takes quite a bit of effort as well. You have to be willing to really dismiss a lot of possibilities. And so I kind of felt like I had narrowed my mind and my way of thinking too much, where it was costing me, it was more to keep denying that there was something than to actually accept that there was. And so then once you get to the point where you're like, okay, I want to accept something, I do see that I'm putting forth too much effort to deny everything, then you have to decide what to believe in. And I think no one wants to be taken a fool, if that makes sense. And no one wants to just gullibly be seen as a weak-minded person to just accept anything. We all have to question and investigate. And I found that the more I questioned, the more answers I received, but also the more questions I had. But every time I studied the Bible, every time I kept seeking answers with good intentions, every time I kept seeking answers, then I always found something. I was always rewarded. It really is like buried treasure, The more you dig, the more things you find, and then it kind of sets you on this treasure hunt where you find piece after piece, and it just keeps you going, and you get more and more excited as you go.
So the more questions you asked, the more answers you got. you became satisfied with the responses you were getting, but you're still inquisitive. You're still ask questions.
It makes you hungry.
Yeah, so it's okay to have these questions.
Yeah.
Charles, you shared in your presentation something very important, and that is something that I greatly, as a friend, I admire about you. You're a mechanical engineer. It's a field you're filled in a scientific, mathematical world with, where people almost they become ennoblized by saying, "Look at all the questions that I have," and people feel, "Oh, we're in the scientific world. We have a lot." How do you deal, in this process of where do I find hope? Christianity, the Bible, not being wanting to take a fool and gullibility, but also saying, you know what, it's a rational process. And you shared a little bit about that in your presentation. In your field, how do you do that dance? What's your thought on that?
It is one of those things, because when people find out that you are in something even remotely scientific or remotely mathematical, and then they find out you're a Christian and you believe in the Bible kind of literally, rather than just figuratively, then you get these kind of incredulous looks of how can you possibly believe that, and that can be, it can be hard, because it's embarrassing. I think it's difficult, because for so many people it's so obvious, but it's not. And that's the kind of the really frustrating thing. It's like at the moment where there's so much false information around with COVID. So much of it that's so well proven and so clear, and yet people won't listen. And for me, it's exactly the same thing with my belief. I think my wording would have been something along the lines of, I'm too much of a skeptic to believe anything else.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which I borrowed from somebody else.
Yeah.
It wasn't in English, so you won't even recognize it. But never mind. So yeah, it's the idea when you go through and you look at the evidence of what's around. So 100 years ago, 150 years ago, the world was so clear that the Bible, the history of the Bible, was just nonsense. There was nothing to back up anything in the Bible. It was all complete rubbish, and everything was it was kind of obvious that the Bible was a fairy tale. And then since then, archaeology has found so many extra things, and found even like names of Bible characters on little bits of stone, and
one of our professors found some of them.
Yeah, and it's when you go through these things, and it's like, okay, you don't see that plastered all over the news,
right?
But you see the opposite plastered all over, and you're kind of like, well, come on, guys. And it's the same with science as well. You see so much. I mean, I love to read science. That's kind of I have a very, very varied reading list. But then you go through other people who are like that. So I have. Let me think. I'm friends with, what is he? He's head of the chemistry department at St Andrews University. Is a
That's right.
creationist. I'm a friend with somebody who works in one of those big particle colliders, a doctor who works in one of the big particle colliders down south. In fact, two doctors who work at the same place, actually, both same. One of them used to live here with us up here. I have so many other friends with doctorates and things like that in these science subjects. There was a guy he's a professor in Germany now, but he was professor here at Heriot-Watt in mathematics. A Christian, amazing pianist.
Members here at one
He
point.
was a member here at one point.
Yeah.
So things like, kind of, when you look around and you meet these other people and you discuss with them, and you can ask that question, and kind of like, well, where does your faith come from? Where does your belief come from? And you realize it's not blind. It's not just...
it can be substantiated.
There's evidence behind it. You're never going to be able to prove anything 100%. There are very, very few things
One way or the other.
prove 100% one way or the other.
Yeah.
Because there's always what they call black swan events.
That's right.
It's like there's the definition. This is what a swan is. It has a long neck, wings, and it's white. And they were completely sure of that. And then they showed up in Australia.
That's right.
Realized that they were completely wrong.
Yeah.
That's the name Nicholas Taleb's series of books on that.
Yeah.
So it's that idea of you can never prove anything 100%, but based on what you've got and as Jessica was saying, based on what you've got, what conclusion do you have to draw? And you get to the point where you say, look, when I compare the two of them, I have to admit that there is a God. I have to admit that He did design things. He loves humanity. He loves me.
Yeah.
And
All right, nice segue into what next section, yeah.
I do try.
Yeah. I think Charles is highlighting some things, and I think we could talk about this particular point of view from our side for a long time. But just to kind of end that little segment, Christianity and faith and science don't have to be one against another, and we can continue going on forward and forward. I'll just say, there are tremendous amount of resources on both sides of the argument. I think it's important for us, both if you're a person that is a believer, believes in God, believes in the Bible, or a person that is a non-believer, for us to have open-minded discussions and studies like that we can have. And I would say continue to be open-minded about these things. And I would like to believe that even though we're each volunteer, well, you guys are volunteers in the church, I'm a paid worker for the church, that we continue to be open-minded with this process. You were talking about something about the Bible it's something that highlights, I think, the most crucial and important aspect about the Bible is that humanity is loved. That was one of the presentations that we talked about, is that we are loved. And the stories that are found here is not just the story of how God created the world. It's not just the story of Jesus dying on the cross. It's not just, all of these weird stories. The ultimate core and heart of what's happening in this book is the fact that each one of us are loved. Here's a big question for us, and I'll leave it open to you guys, whoever wants to jump in there. The question is this: how is it that we sometimes miss the point? We want to go off into all these deep theological things and all these big things. How can we return to the heart of what the Bible is teaching us, what God is trying to convey to us, that He loves us, and that this whole book is to reveal that to us? How can we, as believers, as churches, as Christianity, how can we kind of represent that message to the world, that the core teaching of the Bible is that we are loved by God? It's not just doctrine and theology, it's more. How can we share that more? Whoever's watching, we want you to understand that really is the sentiment behind Christianity and the sentiment behind the Bible. So which one of you guys wants to jump in there, and we'll make another quick segue into the next presentation here.
Wow.
Any thoughts? I'll go check on that real quick. Go for it, guys.
Just a random alarm going off, don't worry. So yeah, I've just been talking. Somebody else want to take this one?
So how do we meet the world, and how do we make it focused and relevant to this key point of God loves humanity? It's I think because we talked about earlier about faith. One thing that we didn't really talk about is this. I see this certainly with my relationship. I kind of saw it as like God was. We look at a bridge, and one of these bridges. What do they call these kind of bridges? You probably know, Charles.
Charles.
A bridge that
Drawbridge.
A drawbridge. That's it. 10 out of 10.
He's not even a structural engineer, guys. Yeah.
So it's like a drawbridge, right? So God's on one side, with his with the Word, tell us exactly, how to build a relationship with Him, and then we're on the other side, and there needs to come a point where as these bridges get close together, sometimes they don't just quite meet. There's still those questions that are unanswered,
right?
And that gap is faith, right? So with every relationship that you have to have this leap of faith, where you have to stretch a little. In terms of how can you make it relevant for somebody who's going through that and asking lots of questions, at what point and everybody has a different point by which they can take that leap and kind of go, okay, let's give it a go. But in every relationship, it's like that, right?
Right.
If you meet when I met Beverly, my wife, we had a long distance relationship for a while as friends, and then when she came close to Manchester, we kind of got more friendly. But it came to a point where you say, okay, I'm going to make a commitment to have a long-term relationship with her. And that is faith. That is her having faith in me as a person, and me having faith in her. And so how can we make it anyway? So let's get back to the point. How can we make it practical today to individuals? It's helping them to experience God now and teaching them how to speak to God and teaching them from the Word where God has showed himself to be love. And I don't want to give too much away about my presentation on Saturday, because I'm going to talk a little bit about this.
So you're going to talk about it next week,
Go
and then I'm
ahead,
talking about it again the week after.
So there's this whole idea that you have to, the Bible says, taste and see that the Lord is good. It gets to a point where you have to just go and try it. And when as a young person, 19, when I tried it, I just felt like, it was just full. It was just exciting. And actually, I remember my friends at the time, 19-year-olds, and people who've been into church all their life, have said, how are you so excited? What is it? Tell me your experience, because they had never gone through that transition that I went through. And so I would encourage anybody who's trying to reach someone, or people who are not being part of a church, I'll say try it. Come and see. And it doesn't cost you anything. And for me, I was just the only 2 times I remember having a smile on my face from ear to ear was on my wedding day.
Yeah.
And actually when I came to Christ.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice.
See, there was a comment in the chat from Morella, which I thought is very relevant to this, which said, some people do not believe in Jesus Christ and argue their life is perfect and they do not need anything else. They have no longing for anything. Why would they need something they cannot make sense of? And I think that's one of the big things that changes people, is when they realize that they do actually need. And I think that's kind of what I was trying to talk about last week, and Jessica was trying to answer this week.
That's right.
As to the actual need that we do have, and that pushes people towards that. And it's only when we realize kind of what the options are and how empty life is without God, which you can't really. It's one of those. Trying to think of a good example. It'll be one of those moments where you've never tried something before in your life, and then you try it and you wonder how you ever survived without it. And it's like, that is the best dessert that there has ever been in this world. Why have I never ordered it before? And only once you've had it and you have that experience can you suddenly go, actually, that is absolutely
amazing.
incredible. And it's having that kind of open mind. See, now I can think of a good example, but it's already gone.
Yeah.
It's having that thing where you can sit there and you can say, yes, I've tried it. So you say, taste and see, and that's exactly the same thing with God. When we realize what's there, it opens our eyes, and you can't go back after you see, and you realize how much bigger things are, how much wider things are.
Okay, Jessica?
I think that honestly, if we honestly ask ourselves as well, whether we believe or not believe, that it would be hard. I'll put it this way: I've yet to meet a person that was not in need of something.
Right.
And I think it definitely is worth reflecting upon, because there's no a perfect human. There's no perfect life, and we all have some sort of struggles that we have gone through, or we are going through, or we will. We all have needs. Maybe we have all of our physical needs being met, but maybe there are emotional needs or emotional issues that we have. Maybe it's relationship. I don't believe that there's anyone that has everything that they could ever want. So I think that there's always something to drive us to look for more.
Yeah, and like you said, you've never met anybody that doesn't need something. And I think every one of us, because we're human, unfortunately, we will come across a circumstance, a situation in our life where we feel and we think to ourselves, man, something's missing. You were talking about that this morning, Jesus being that missing puzzle piece, and like the picture isn't complete until you find that puzzle piece, and our children hoarding that because they want to be the one to put that last puzzle piece. There's a lot of people that they may go through life at one point thinking to themselves, I'm happy with what's going on. I'm happy. My life is perfect. I'm complete. And then the very next day or the next week or the next year, they come across something that they think to themselves, I just don't have the necessary resources to be able to address this matter in my life. And when I turn through the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, these are 4 persons who wrote some biographies about Jesus' life. And each one of them, as you read these 4 books in the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you'll find that there's a boy, there's a girl, there's a mom, there's a dad, there's a woman, there's a man, there's a soldier, there's a Jew, there's a Roman, there's a Greek. You literally find in those 4 books, a rich man, poor man, a religious man, a non-religious man. In those 4 books of the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you will find just about every demographic person in this planet that comes to the point where something is missing in their life, and they find it in Jesus. And I think that's important, because Jesus is not the type of person, God is not the type of person that's going to force himself upon us, but he's readily available. That whenever we do come to the point where we do find ourselves, I just don't have the means to address this matter in my life, Jesus says, I'm standing right here. I'm there to help you and to minister to you. Now, myself as a pastor, I've had the opportunity to travel many places in the world. And in every place in the world, whether it's in Estonia or whether it's in Africa, whether it's anywhere that I've traveled, Canada, I find that there are people in every walk of life that they think life was okay, and then they realize they've come across a bridge, a divide, and they need a bridge to get them through these circumstances. So to kind of address Morella's question here, yes, there will be people that they may feel at this point in time that their life is okay and perfect, and then something happens, like Jessica was saying, and there's a need that they just can't find an answer to. And I think that's where the Bible gives us some of that hope, which is what our first presentation was about. The Bible is there to give us hope that we are cared for, that we are loved, but also to provide for us answers to these questions that we have. There's a question that came on there. Go ahead, Charles.
I was going to say, I was seeing the question here from Katja. We're going to come to that in a couple of weeks. That's going to be covered by one of the presentations.
Yes.
When we talk about Am I Alone, which I'm doing in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
I'm specifically going to be addressing that. So we will come to that question in one of the main programs. So we won't answer it now. But
yeah.
So,
go ahead.
Going back to Marilla's question, I mean, I like the story of the prodigal son. It's in the Bible where, he leaves his father, takes all of his inheritance.
The prodigal son is in a book called Luke, and it's in chapter 15, if you want to follow along with the saying, yeah.
So he spends everything that his father's given him, and he gets to rock bottom. All the friends that he had now have all gone away, and he finds himself feeding pigs and actually eating the food that the pigs are eating. And the Bible says something very interesting. He said he came to the end of himself. He'd exhausted everything that he had of himself, and then he realized that I should maybe go home back to my father. Mm-hmm. And at times when and even as ourselves as Christians, we're not here as people who are perfect. Even as ourselves as Christians, with our Christian walk, sometimes we try and do it all by ourselves. And when we get to the end of ourselves, when we run out of all of our ideas, when all of our money's run out, maybe, that could get you out of the problem, maybe you don't have friends who can help you, and you get to the end of that, maybe the stress is too much. And when you get to the end of that, you realize that you need some help. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's when, for many people, is when we find God. But it doesn't have to be like that, right? It doesn't have to be like that. We can turn to God now, today. And I have to keep reminding myself of that, because very often I find myself, I'm just working really hard trying to make ends meet with my own strength. So in terms of why do people think that my life is fine? It's because I work very hard at keeping it all together.
Right.
But when the pressure of life, and COVID, and when there's stress at home, or when there's stress with the children, and things start to fall apart, and you just can't keep all the plates spinning, that's when you realize that maybe I do need some help.
So that's one thing we think about, what we can actually control. So when we're looking and where our stress is, it's all about the things that I can do, and what it's all about me, which is exactly what Jessica was talking about this morning. And there's only a limit to what I can do. So I work hard, I provide for my family, I have a good job, I work for a good company, so I have my job has had no issues at all throughout this COVID period. I've been as busy as ever. Working from home as I was working from the office, so I've been very secure in all of this, but it's kind of when you realize how much, kind of where your limits are, and things like this pandemic that we're in at the moment, realize, oh yes, everything's fine, I'm the king of my life, and suddenly something you have absolutely no control about, something that started on the other side of the planet, that you have absolutely, there's zero anything you can do about it, and it comes around. I mean, you had it bad when it came through. It's one of those things where it's just life. It's a product of the broken world that we live in, and we have to realize the only solution, the only answer to any of that is Jesus.
That's right.
And it's where he then offers that to us. We realize we are loved. We realize kind of what he gives to us. And you were talking earlier about the acceptance you received when you came into the church. For me, when I've moved, when I moved location, I've come to a new church. The acceptance I've had when I've moved into the new church. So I'm a member here in Dunfermline in this church, and the acceptance I felt when I came in was tremendous. And that's just people. Jesus has that acceptance and more.
That's right.
So the acceptance you get from Jesus, because it's like when I first walked into the Dunfermline church, I mean, I was dressed smart. I looked like a reasonable person. But I didn't look sketchy. There was nothing for anybody to think, oh, I'm worried about him. So I walk in and I'm perfectly I'm accepted by people who see what's on the outside. But it's when I can then come to Jesus, and he can see, and he answers in the same way as everyone did here, but he knows what's on the inside. And the inside, something I talked about, I'm the only one who knows what's on the inside, and I know it's not good.
Right.
I'm the only one who knows the full extent of that. And then Jesus does as well, and he still loves me. And he still kind of holds out his hand to catch me when I fall. He still wants to help, and kind of what that help looks like. We're going to talk about more in the next, you'll talk next week, I'm talking the week after. More detail on that. But that kind of, that open hand that he has for us, even though he knows everything that I am, that's really powerful.
That's right. Now, Charles, you said two things that are important, and then we're going to come to another question that came up here in just a second. But you said something that's very important. Number one is it's Jesus that's the solution. Yes. He's the answer. He's, why is it that we need Jesus? Now, don't get me wrong. Yes, I'm a pastor of a church. I'm a pastor of a Christian church of a specific denomination, Seventh-day Adventist. The answer isn't the denomination. The answer isn't the church. We are a subset, a marginal aspect of what God has given to help bring hope to the world. But the hope is Jesus. He's the answer. So I want to make sure that we highlight that. Yes, we would love to have you worship with us at our Edinburgh church, worship here at Hope House here in Dunfermline, at our Musselburgh church. We'd love to have you worship with us. But the church, the denomination, the religion, Christianity, is only a small aspect of what God has used to bring hope to the world. But all of this, all the church, the denomination, the religion, we're trying our best to point to Jesus. We fail, we make mistakes, but ultimately it's Jesus. The second thing is that you walked into church. In other words, nobody dragged you here. God didn't tie you to the back seat of your car. No. In other words, the choice is always ours. And I think that's the beauty about God's character. He's not a forceful God. He's a God who gives and presents the opportunities. He gives the opportunity to encounter with him. But it's ultimately your choice to kind of walk in here as well. Another question that we have here is, I think it's a question that is being asked that I think a lot of people are wondering, specifically considering the world that we're in right now. And the question is coronavirus a punishment from God? That's a very big question. It's a question that we're kind of going to be talking a little bit down the road. But just to kind of, if I can take a punch at the question, is that okay, guys? Take a little jab at the question here. Is coronavirus a punishment from God? We live in a world with a lot of things that are wrong. And of course, we like to point the finger at something or at somebody, which in this case is God. I was watching a short clip. It was only about a 45-second, maybe a minute-long video clip, YouTube clip. And the video was a person knocking on this home. And it was, in this case, it was a trailer home. In America, it's a trailer, what do we call them, caravans? I think it's a big, but it's a home. And a person's knocking on the door, and you don't see, but they're handing them something. The person says, no, and then I'll put it on your door anyways. And it's all silent, right? You can just see some captions below. The person walks off the porch, and then the person, you see the owner of the home sit on their couch, they light a cigarette, right? And they fall asleep, and this is at nighttime. They fall asleep with the cigarette in hand. The cigarette catches the couch on fire, the sofa on fire. The caravan catches on fire. The person runs outside holding their dog and their cat in arm. And then they look to heaven and they say, in caption, God, why did you let this happen? Where were you? In other words, the caravan's burning down. They've lost everything. And they're pointing to God, where were you? And then the camera pans down to something, a little leaflet on the floor that was flown away from the door. And the leaflet on the floor says, do you need help to quit smoking? In other words, the person was offering help if the person needed help smoking to quit smoking. The person said no, sat on the couch. The cigarette caught the thing on fire. The house burned down, and then people are getting mad. God, why did you let it? We face a lot of things in this world that we like to blame on God, but many times it's our own fault. Things that we do poorly. It's kind of like I eat donuts. By the way, if you're watching this, I love donuts. My kids, my wife, every church, you guys know I love. But if I see myself obese and overweight, fighting diabetes and all of these different things, and I say, God, why did you let my heart get clogged and diabetes happen when it's me, shoving these unhealthy foods? Can I blame God? Can we blame God for things that are happening in this world that are oftentimes our own fault and our own responsibility? And then when God doesn't intervene, when God doesn't do something, we're like, God, why are you allowing for this to happen? I believe one of the beautiful things about God's character is He gives us free will. He gives us free choice. One of the things is Jessica and I, we were kind of editing and going through her presentation and trying to figure out what to include, what not to include. One of the things that we were studying about is God didn't create robots. He didn't want us to love Him, to follow Him out of a duty, as a have to. It's programmed in us to follow. He made us free moral agents. He gave us the opportunity to choose. And this world and what we're facing in this world, yes, things happen, and sometimes God does intervene, but oftentimes we face the caravan burning down because we had that thing in our mouth that's going to cause the pain and the suffering. Now, I'm not saying coronavirus is necessarily one human person's fault, but there's a lot of illnesses. There's a lot of wildfires. How many times have we heard of a wildfire starting because somebody threw a cigarette out their car window? Or how many times have we heard of some pandemic in some part of the world because of this and that? I think a lot of things that happen in this world, including the coronavirus, we can't pin it on God per se, when we know that it's been us with the key in the ignition, driving our own vehicle of our world's choices. It's a lot of it on us. Anybody want to jump in? There's a comment on here afterwards. Go for it, guys.
I perhaps did want to say that the different, because there are somewhere there's kind of very direct consequences of things we choose, and things like I eat a lot of donuts and then have a heart attack.
Right.
You can kind of see where that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
But
he gave me a glare, by the way.
But then the other side of that is you get the very indirect ones, and I think kind of coronavirus is a very indirect one where we kind of, in general, we're doing things which are putting us in closer contact with animals, which is what a coronavirus is. It's a virus that comes from animals, crosses over to humanity.
Right.
We are kind of overcrowding ourselves in cities, and that's causing a problem. We're spending an awful lot of carbon traveling around the world, and having so much contact across the world. And I think that's also kind of, so there's all these little elements that kind of indirectly add up to the situation where we're in today that can cause us problems like this.
Yeah.
And kind of the worrying thing is they tell us this, it can easily happen again with a different virus.
That's right. Jessica highlighted something important, and that's the question started. I was like, what would the best version of ourselves look like? When we do look at the Bible, we find that Genesis had a perfect world. There was no killing animals. There was no carbon problems. There was the world before sin entered was perfect. There were no broken relationships. There was no spousal abuse. There was no rape. There was no murder. None of this was there until the great deception that you shared upon is, why is the world like this? And the world that we see that's in flames is a result of us departing and breaking that relationship with God. But then Jessica brought something important, that Jesus wants to transform us, to restore us to the better version of ourselves. And ultimately, that's kind of what we find in the Bible, is we start out with a perfect world, but then we also end with God recreating our world, bringing us back to His original plan for us. But that world is for those that want to be there, those that choose to be there. And it's like if I had a chance to take a shuttle to a better place, I would get my family in there, give them the choice. That's what the ark was about, to kind of go in that direction. Owen, we'll turn it over to you. You have I don't know if you want to answer any of these questions, share some thoughts, and maybe kind of bring us in a wrap up. But before he does that, next week, Owen is going to be sharing his presentation, and you'll see that here in just a second. I want to invite you to continue to watch, to dialogue, and share with us every week as we do this. We have several more presentations to come, and I think we're going to do this again. We're going to do these basic questions of life, probably part 1, and then we're going to kick another one, part 2 in the future, and talk about some more questions. So please continue to share your questions with any one of us and with everybody else as we continue in the future as well. Owen, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
Okay, so on Saturday we're going to be presenting something really interesting, and it's a question that many people are asking, especially right now. In preparing for it, actually, I did some research, and there's, I don't know if you know about coaching. It's a big booming business right now. If I told you 10 years ago that I have a personal coach, you'd probably think fitness, right? But no, now if you have a personal coach, it could be anything. It could be, a life coach. It could be a coach for your goals, a coach for your. There's just so many different types of coaches, and now it's a multi-billion-pound business.
Oh,
because everyone's asking that question: how can what's the purpose of my life, and how can I improve my life? It's a burning topic, but there is an answer.
that's right.
And we're going to learn more about that on Saturday. So tune in on Saturday where you'll join us on is it Facebook?
Facebook and YouTube and Instagram.
And Instagram, where you'll be able to learn more. Jessica, you going to close with a prayer for us?
All right.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and talk to God. Dear Lord, thank you very much because you didn't create robots, and we are free moral agents with questions, with desires, with struggles. And we know that you're here for us to answer all of them. So Lord, I pray that these basic questions of life, this series and these live sessions will be just the beginning of our relationship with you, of us asking and receiving answers. Lord, I pray that you would be with each person, wherever they are, from wherever they're listening, and that you would give them the guidance that they're looking for in their lives. Lord, give us all encouragement, and most importantly, may we have your love. And we thank you for that. And we ask all of this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Owen, thank you. And Charles, Jessica, thank you, Gabe, for coming here tonight. We're so glad you guys are here with us. Next month, in the month of April, we're kicking off a brand new group of presentations. And then at the last part of April, we're also going to be having another live session, Volume 2?
Volume 2, yeah.
Volume 2 of our live sessions together as well. For now, take care. Bye from all of us.
We have one more question.
Here.
I don't know if we have any time.
No, wait, hold on. Can we take some time, maybe just a few more seconds? You want to ask that question? Go ahead, Jessica.
I don't have any plans.
Because of the lag, I saw it after we prayed. It says, my mother is a Christian, so even though I'm not religious myself, I've done some reading and listening in the past. Would you say that free will and intelligence was given to help fix the world?
It's a good question. Any thoughts? Because I can jump in there, but I'm going to let y'all go first.
Yeah, I think, for me, I think the answer is no, because I think those things existed before there was a problem.
That's right. You're online with exactly what I was going to say. Yep.
So,
could you be specific?
Yeah.
What existed before there was a problem?
Free will and intelligence. I think free will and intelligence both were part of God's original plan. So before everything went haywire, as I said a couple of weeks ago, we had free will even then, and that's kind of going back to the idea of the robot. I do remember hearing a sermon once. A preacher, he came up with it was an old one, so he had a little cassette recorder thing, and he kind of played it up to the microphone, and it was like, I love you. And he was American, obviously, hence the accent. And that was, it was kind of, does this thing actually love me, or is it just saying it? And it's like, it's just saying it. It has no choice. It's a recording. It can't choose. When Adam and Eve were created back in Genesis chapter 1, chapter 2, which we looked at earlier, those back then they were given the choice whether to love God or not. So I don't think free will and intelligence, I don't think those were given to help to fix, but I definitely think God is using those to help to fix, and those are part of that, because without free will, without intelligence, well, we're not going anywhere.
We couldn't decide.
So I'll jump in there as well. I think you're right. That was, you can call it part of our initial programming.
Yes.
It was innate within us, and there's a word, a specific word, actually in the Bible that kind of helps substantiate the idea that it wasn't necessarily there to help fix the world, but kind of as an idea of maintenance of the perfect order of the world. And it's in the book of Genesis, chapter 2. By the way, the word Genesis in Hebrew, Bereshit, actually means the beginning. The beginning meaning the beginning, the origins of our planet. Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. Genesis 2 and verse 15. By the way, if you're reading the Bible for the first time here with us, Genesis is the very first part of the book, so it's all the way usually to the left side. It's a big number 2, that's the chapter. The little small number 15, which is the verse. It says, Then the Lord God took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. To tend and keep it. So the idea here, so the question is, would you say that free will and intelligence was given to fix the world? I believe we use something that was originally intended to keep the world going in perfect order. You know, we find that Adam and Eve, they named the animals, they tended the garden. By the way, the Hebrew word where it says here to tend and to keep it is it created an order, a structure. Much like a child will organize their teddy bears in order from height, from big to small, that's something innately programmed. If you're like my wife, it's color-coded and by name and everything. If you're obsessive compulsive. So it's in our nature to want to find an order and organization of things. God created Adam and Eve, put them in the garden to tend and to keep it, to make sure that things were running smoothly. That didn't go away. Whenever we see that problem and sin entered the world, when evil entered the world, we used this original gift before Satan even came along and tempted Adam and Eve in the next chapter. He gave us this free will and this intelligence to try and keep the world going in perfect order, to maintain the world. Unfortunately, as we find the progression of the Bible from Genesis to the book of Revelation, you find that the world ultimately reaches a point where it's disastrous. And humanity can no longer do anything else to keep the floodwaters from rising and coming and taking over, metaphorically speaking. So you find that God, however, has the ultimate plan and presents to us a choice. So we find here, to kind of answer the question, I would say that free will intelligence wasn't given to fix the world, but rather it was given to the world before the world needed fixing. I'll say that again. It wasn't free will and intelligence, it wasn't given to us in order to fix the world after the fall. It was given to humanity innately in our hearts, in our minds, before the world even needed to be fixed. So that's kind of a short answer. Anybody else want to jump in there real quick? Otherwise, we'll kind of leave it there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good question.
Thank you for those of you guys that asked those questions. I think these are very big questions, important questions. And these are some questions that actually give us ideas. So as we go into the next basic questions of life in the future, we can take these questions. Now, Charles, do you have...
because I was going to say, because there are elements of the answer we gave there which are going to pop up in some of the coming weeks. We're going to talk more about choice. We're going to talk more about kind of making a choice. We're going to talk more about kind of using our free will and things like that. We're going to cover more detail on those subjects over the coming weeks.
That's right. And we'll put, by the way, I'll ask Jordana, if you're watching here right now, if you can put the link to the basic questions of life. The topics are there as well.
Yes, that's true.
So on the YouTube channels, you can find on our description on the Why Jesus or any of the other presentations, there's a link where you can go to find the order of the presentations and the topics that we have been covering. So you can go there. I'm going to try and I'll read some of the topic lists that we have here. We're at Why Jesus. Next week it's What's My Purpose. The next question is Am I Alone? How can I find the right way to live? Which is talking about morality and good and evil. Talking about can I trust the Bible? So a lot of the questions that you may be wondering right now are topics that we try to include in this first series of presentations to come. Jessica.
I was just going to say, thank you guys for these questions. Mirella and Neil, the questions you guys asked, it really spurred my thinking for some future conversations that I would love to discuss and talk about.
So we'll see Owen going home tonight and furiously rewriting it
Yeah.
for us to record.
No, not at all, not at all.
Well, you know, it's just like, if that's, you know, if we're saying no, that's not what our free will intelligence was created for, then it's like brings the question, what was it created for? It's like, oh, whole new conversation.
That's right. That's right. Again, thank you everybody for joining us, for asking these questions. By the way, we are all accessible. You can find us all on our social media platforms on Facebook and Instagram. So feel free, but also especially if you go to @thebasicquestions on our Instagram, you can also send us messages there. Our Facebook as well, which is @thebasicquestionsoflife. So both on Instagram and Facebook, you can send us messages there, and we have access to those questions. So even after this live session is over, we can continue to dialogue with you there. For now, thank you. We look forward to seeing you next Saturday morning as Owen shares the question, do I have a purpose? Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.